Go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you for joining us today for the Balancing Personalizations and Privacy webinar. I'm Lauren Janik. I'm in the marketing department here at Brightfind. Before we begin, please note that we are recording this webinar and we will send you the recording after the fact. And if you have any questions throughout, please submit them through your Q&A feature and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So here's our agenda for today. After our presenter introductions, we are going to talk about establishing trust with your web visitors. Then we'll move on to everyone's favorite subject, GDPR. We'll walk through different ways to receive cookie consent and cover some additional ways to earn trust. We'll provide you with a deeper dive about personalizing, how to personalize websites, including the different types of personalization and even touch on AI. And at the end, we'll give you 10 tips and tricks for making sure you have unique customer journeys. So now let me introduce you to our first presenter, Frank Klassen, who's Brightfind CEO. Frank, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Lauren, and welcome everyone. So I'm Frank Klassen, the CEO of Brightfind, and since we're talking about personalization and privacy today, I can share that I love personalized experiences. I can tell you I'm a fairly open book, and I'm pretty comfortable telling you that I like wine, and I'm pretty comfortable having some of my personal information be used to provide me with a personalized online wine buying experience. When I go to Total Wine, I'm delighted that they show me a list of popular wines and that they're all red. I'm not particularly fond of white wine, so I'm glad that they're not showing me white wines in this list. And I don't want them to, and they know that through my buying experience. So for me, that's all good. Now, besides my wine habit, I also work for Brightfind. We are a specialized digital design development agency, and we cover a pretty wide spectrum of capabilities and services for our customers. Everything from strategy to information architecture, creative design, usability testing, content management implementation, integration to your back-end business systems, and data analytics service that we call Experience Insight. We have with us today Ed Kennedy from Episerver, and just to let you know, Brightfind is a top partner with Episerver. We are one of their premium solution partners. We recently, earlier this year, was named their industry go-to-market partner of the year, and we have the Episerver CMS specialization classification as part of our partnership with Epi. And with us today, as I said, we have Ed Kennedy.
Thanks, Frank. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to engage on this topic around privacy and personalization. Obviously, two very important and related fields. Things that people wouldn't necessarily know about me walking around the office is that I'm a certified yoga instructor, but people do know me as like Mr. Kale in this office. So they know that I'm pretty health conscious. And I do, like Frank, like personalization. However, I think we've all experienced where major companies are still getting it wrong with respect to personalization. And Frank, if you pull up the next part of this slide, you'll see what I mean. I went on a yoga pant binge and bought several different types of yoga pants, and Amazon is still recommending those to me, weeks later. And yes, I did buy the electric flashing shoes, but they were in gold. And so just to make it clear, we get very intimidated sometimes by the idea of personalizing, and it has to be right, and we have to do everything all the time, everywhere. And I think after this webinar is over, you'll see that there are places to begin and start that are relevant to your constituents, instead of just blasting it all over your website and your emails. Even companies like Amazon aren't quite getting it right all the time. And so, Frank, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I can just say a few words about Episerver. We are a digital experience platform that runs in the cloud. We run over 30,000 websites around the world. Many associations and nonprofits and member organizations use Episerver to run their .com websites, their intranets, and their transactional e-commerce websites. Some of the associations that you can see on the right here. We have a personalization engine, an e-commerce platform, a web content management system, email marketing, and analytics all in one cloud subscription. So that's a little bit about Episerver. I'll jump back in to talk about personalization, but I know, Frank, you've got to talk about privacy as well.
All right. So before we actually get started with our content, let's take a quick poll to see if people are using personalization or not. So you will see a poll pop up on your computer. Are you currently offering personalized experiences on your website? So you get to vote. You can say, yes, we're definitely do it. No, we're not yet, but we're working on it. And even maybe you started, but just haven't gotten very far. Let us know how you're doing with personalization. I'll give you a few more seconds to get those votes submitted. All right, looks like they've stopped coming in. Oh, so it looks like a majority of you haven't started yet, but you're working on it. So you might not quite be there. So this is the perfect talk for you, because we will be talking not only about how to start, but some things that you can definitely do to really get going with that. Okay, Frank?
So, we're talking about privacy and personalization, and one of the keys to being successful at that is as you're interacting with your constituents is you need to establish trust. And for organizations like yours, building trust has always been a major strategic initiative. Constituents have to trust you all as associations to be, one step ahead of them in their career, to help them with continuing education, to come up to speed with everything from technology that changes the way people work to what's happening in the industry, your particular industry on Capitol Hill. And so that, it's been a long time practice and process and importance to your organizations to establish trust, and you do that well. And so we all have been moving along, establishing trust well, and then this happens. GDPR. Along comes GDPR and privacy regulations. And what's happened is we've gone from, earning trust the old-fashioned way to being now legally required to respect the privacy of our constituents. And frankly, even though you're all, on muted microphones, it was loud enough. I heard your moans when this slide came up, because GDPR has had a big impact and been, a challenge for most organizations, both technically as well as from a messaging perspective and from a marketing perspective. So although it's been a challenge, I would ask that you think about this regulatory framework, this new regulatory frameworks, a little bit differently than perhaps you have been. And so in my opinion, these regulatory frameworks and requirements actually provide organizations like yours with an opportunity to increase the trust factor. You're going to go from gathering trust through interactions to proving your trust by adhering to these regulatory requirements. And it's actually an opportunity for marketers in particular to improve the customer experience and to improve customer trust. Because to some extent, consumers already don't trust us marketers all that much. We have now an opportunity through GDPR to regain that trust to some extent. And it's not just GDPR. Some of you may be aware that California Consumer Privacy Act is going to go into effect January 1, 2020. Canada's Privacy Act has been around quite a while. And that these regulatory frameworks aren't just sticking in place, they are constantly being evaluated, reevaluated. There's going to be continued change in that regulatory framework. And we need to be capable of responding to that. So, who's trustworthy out there? And doctors, firefighters, teachers, all have a reasonable amount of trust amongst the general public. This is a report from HubSpot research that they've done. Unfortunately, marketers, so any of the marketers on this webinar, marketers have a pretty low trust level out there. So when we do things, we have to figure out how to get people to trust us in those marketing efforts. I mean, we're close to being, labeled with politicians and lobbyists. So not a good place to start from, but at least it's a low bar that we should be able to leap above quickly. And, to some extent, there's reason for consumers and constituents to be somewhat untrustworthy of various efforts. There's tons of emails out there. We all get them. There's lots of experiences that we have on the web that engender a lack of trust. So we need to try and overcome that. Now, luckily, I have some good news to report also, that in general, consumers and your constituents, they're comfortable with the brands that they know. You've already earned credibility with them. And in general, there is a willingness to share that information with you. So this is a report from Accenture, 2018 report on personalization. 91% of consumers are more likely to shop with brands who recognize them by name and remember their preferences and provide them with relevant information. 83% of consumers are willing to share personal data to enable a higher level of personalization, as long as you're transparent about it. I mean, this is good news. Again, if we can gain that trust, then we can apply personalization successfully. Now, we also, there are things you can do with personalization that can be a bit creepy, and you don't want to turn off your constituents through creepy marketing. This particular one, 35% of consumers found that ads on social sites for items they've browsed on other websites, they find a bit creepy. So things like retargeting, and I know a number of organizations use retargeting, has potentially a creepy factor to it. You just need to be aware of that as you plan for your personalization efforts. So in terms of gaining that trust online, cookie consent is one of the sort of first elements of the GDPR and other regulatory impacts online. So gaining consent from your users to use their data, that's what this whole cookie consent transformation has been about. And I'm going to show you some examples of cookie consent online, just so you can get a sense of sort of the progression. And I'm going to show you a progression of examples from very simple, straightforward cookie consent models to more information and more complexity from a variety of organizations, just to give you an idea of how you might move forward on it or change what you're doing now. This first example is from an organization that's very straightforward. And, when you're doing your cookie consent, you want to, and other types of personalization and explanations for it, you want to be transparent. So you want to tell them how you're going to use that information. And this is pretty straightforward. We're going to use it to enhance your user experience, if you see in the bottom left hand of this website. And you want to use plain English. In this initial messaging about cookies, don't use legalese. Make it plain English. And you'll see they've done a good job of using the same brand elements from their main website in this messaging, and maintaining brand consistency in your messaging about personalization will be important, I think, to maintain a level of trust. So they know that this messaging and this information is from this organization in the first place and is relevant to that organization's mission and the online experience. So this next example just takes another step forward in terms of providing a little bit more information, specific details about they're going to use the cookie to know a little bit more about you, to improve your browsing experience. They're going to store locally, cookies are stored locally on your computer. So just providing a little bit more detail. And they're providing not only a link to their cookie policy, but also a link to their privacy statement. So just, again, a little bit more progression of information. And they're asking for essentially a positive opt-in OK button here. So getting some interaction with the end user. Again, these are all things that can enhance the sort of trust factor of this interaction.
Frank.
And then a third, yep. Sorry.
Something I think might be worth noting on this is that we hear the word cookies every single day. We're familiar with GDPR. We understand why we get these pop-ups when we visit websites. But if that's not your world, you might not necessarily understand it. So there might be constituents who just want to come to the website to quickly make a purchase, make a donation, register for a conference, and they see something about asking for their information and they automatically say no because it's just a kind of knee-jerk reaction. So this simple sentence explains to them, oh, this is why they do it, and I understand now. So I think through just a few words, you can really make a difference.
Thanks. Great points, Lauren. Appreciate that. And then just progressively more, an organization you're all probably pretty familiar with, just even they're asking for even more, or they're providing even more information. And they're talking actually about, they use 3 types of cookies. Cookies that are strictly necessary for the running of the site, cookies for analytics and performance, and cookies for advertising. And so they're taking an even deeper dive into why and how they're using cookies. And again, a link to their cookie policy. And then they're taking the next step forward, which is, okay, and we're going to give you, the user, the ability to manage your cookie settings. It's not just an on-off, an accept or no accept. They're saying, okay, we want to give you greater control. I think that's, again, is a factor that can improve trust. And I'll say, I also think of, a 4th type of cookie, which is personalization. You can use cookies as an organization to capture some information that then drives a personalized experience, not just for marketing purposes, but actually for maybe some usability purposes. And so this manage your cookie setting is an interesting one, and I think, again, improves the relationship you have with that individual end user. And this particular example says, okay, you say you're going to allow us to use your cookies, but I only want you to use it just strictly necessary for purposes of making the site work. But I could choose to have it a full experience, so that you can track my personalized data, so that you can provide me with a more efficient or a more effective or a more enjoyable user experience. So, cookie policies come in many forms, and there's lots of examples on the web. And again, generally you want your messaging about this to be transparent and have as little legalese as possible. But obviously, in a policy like this, there's going to be some more legal explanation. But you really should try and make sure that you cover at least 5 characteristics in a cookie policy. You should define, what cookies are. You should define how you're going to use those cookies, as an organization. You should tell them how they can disable cookies as part of your cookie policy. You should provide information that allows them to ask questions about your cookie policy. You should date your policy. And I think this is important because, again, this regulatory framework is constantly moving, and being able to say that you're up to date through your policies, keeping in touch, in track with changes to regulatory policies over time is a good idea. And you should try and also have a link to your privacy policy within your cookie policy as well. So just some broad areas to make sure you cover. So, cookies are that sort of first line. It's of the trust factor, and for us to capture some information that allows us to improve the user experience. But there are other ways to capture trust. And so, consistent, transparent language throughout. So, not just for cookie policies and the cookie messaging, but anytime you have some interaction with the user, login is kind of the next sort of ubiquitous interaction that you guys have with your constituents. So don't just have a username and password and a submit. Tell people. I mean, I think this is a good example of telling people exactly how you're going to use or change their experience when they log in. So this organization is saying, we're going to personalize the experience. We're going to provide you access to members-only content. We're going to change pricing to be more accurate. So this is a good way to, again, enhance the messaging that you have on various interactions you have with your constituents to increase trust and understanding of how you're going to use their data. And then when you do, try to progressively capture more data, this is an example of, again, a personalization widget that comes up on the screen when you log into this website. And when you click on that as a user, the user's allowed to then tell the organization, what topic of area of interest they have, what discipline would they want to hear more about or be tagged with. And then they tell them, oh, well, this is what's going to happen to you when you give us this information. We're going to provide a more personalized experience, for example, on upcoming events. And thirdly, they give the opportunity for the user to disable the personalization feature. So all of this messaging together, I think, is a good example of how you gain trust maintain trust, tell people how you're going to use their data. Just another progressive example of that. And so it's messaging that can be textual, but also I think it's important to remember that websites can have a very emotional reaction, and you can elicit good, positive emotional reactions from your constituents. So gaining trust is about making sure the people who come to the website see themselves in your website. If you have very distinct personas or user constituents, and they can see themselves in your imagery on your website, that also can help to increase the trust factor, which then hopefully increases your ability to capture good information about them and let them be comfortable with you doing that. And lastly, I'd like to say that, when you move forward in your personalization model or strategy, that you should be asking your constituents about this. Don't just make assumptions that, yes, I should go ahead and capture information about their demographics and geography and show them stuff based on that. Go out and ask them first, right? And use data to find out whether some of these things are effective. So, this is just Google Analytics and a campaign report. And we can see that, a personalized email campaign was used more effectively than an email campaign that didn't have personalization in it. So use data to inform your potential personalization strategy and ask them. So, we do surveys fairly often, and our constituents do our customers do surveys to their constituents. Ask them about, targeting and personalization and whether they, one, are willing to participate in that, and what kinds of things, what kind of value would they get from that personalization experience. Use data to make these decisions. Don't just go out there and try it without having some analytics that can help determine whether they're effective or not, or especially ask first is always a good policy. So that's privacy, and my part of this webinar. I'm going to hand this over to Ed now to talk a little bit more deeply about personalization. Ed, it's all yours.
Thank you, Frank. So now let's actually talk about what happens once you've gotten consent through cookie policies, and you can start to devour this data and start to use it to deliver more relevant, personalized experiences to your constituents. Based on what Frank was talking about earlier, it's clear that consumers and constituents like it when things are personalized to them, when it's relevant. But what we're finding is that marketers are struggling to personalize the customer experience. Based off of data we have, only 9% of organizations use real-time behavior, things that people are actually capturing and observing through the cookie, are being used to personalize the website experience. And only 15% of brands personalize beyond broad segments and clustering like personas and are actually individualizing the experience. So there's a lot of white space here for associations to begin to provide more relevant experiences. And if you feel like you're behind, you're not. You're not alone in just starting to figure this out. Identifying the best use cases is where we're going to begin. I know that, Lauren, you wanted to also throw in another poll here to talk about challenges that people may be facing.
Thanks, Ed. I do. Now that we might be a little bit more willing to admit that we're not the only ones struggling with this, what my question is for you all is, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to personalization? And you may look at these answers and say, well, all of them. So instead, I just want you to pick the one that's probably the most challenging to you in your organization right now when it comes to personalization.
I'm really eager to see what kind of issues people with personalizing.
They are still, all right, it looks like, responses are still coming in. All right, let's give it just a few more seconds. If you haven't voted, go ahead and do so. All right. Wow, looks like a little bit of everything got voted, with just barely winning out. We don't have enough time. Now that is understandable, but look how closely the other ones came in with we don't have the right tools in place and we simply don't have the right understanding yet.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and especially having enough time and having the right tools in place, I think also are related. That it takes one thing to select content and journeys that you're going to personalize, but also if the tools you have in place are slow or laborious or difficult to use, that drives the perception that I don't have enough time, because to personalize the experience, I'm going to have to use some tool that's not as effective or user friendly. And then we'll also come back to this when we talk about AI and machine learning and how that's helping marketers automate the personalization experience as well.
Oh, and Ed, we had someone comment that it's definitely missing some of the other reasons why people might not be doing personalization.
Sure.
And we could have listed reasons all day, but these are just some of the ones that I think we've heard recently that we added to the poll. But yet we hear you loud and clear. We know there are lots of reasons.
Great. Yeah, thank you for the audience member keeping us honest on the broad categories of personalization that are challenging. What I want to talk about is creating some distinctions between the different types of data that you're gathering and can gather, and then what that means to personalize. So I'm going to talk about the difference between demographic data and behavioral data. And my point here being, demographic data is used to establish why and what to personalize along your constituent's journey. And behavioral data is used to establish when and where you should personalize that content. So demographic data are things like income, gender, age, location, career status, stage in life. These are things that broadly allow you to create personas and understand what content will motivate those types of users. Behavioral data is something that we can actually see an individual doing or observe them doing, or they tell us that they've done, like signing up for a newsletter, registering for an event, visiting the website, providing their mailing address. That's behavioral data, things that we actually see individuals doing. So demographic data is used to establish your personas and the content strategy that will motivate that particular type of user. And then behavioral data is used to sequence that content into the customer journey. And I'll allude to this when we talk about a join journey for an associate versus a renew journey for an associate. So let's talk about what happens when we use behavioral data to personalize the digital experience. It's less common that you personalize based off of demographic data. It's more relevant to users that you personalize with the behavioral data you're observing them do or take along their engagement with you. So let's look at what would be a very happy path for many of you as association marketers is the join journey. They might go onto Google and search for Physicians Association, visit your homepage. Perhaps what they give up is their email address so that they can sign up for a newsletter for more information. They receive the email from you and they open that email. They may not click on any links in the email, but later on Facebook, they find your association page and like that as well. And ultimately, they come onto a mobile device and register for an upcoming event. And they open up the event confirmation email associated to that event they've registered for. And through that link, perhaps they join. I can appreciate that this is overly simplified, linear, but I'm using it to illustrate a couple of points. Conversely, a renew journey has similar elements, but perhaps different steps. So people might be on your website already because they're a member and they're searching for articles or information related to a topic that's associated to their field or discipline. They view that article on your website. Perhaps they don't do anything from there. They got the information they need, but they open up your monthly newsletter. They view a webinar that you're hosting or register for that webinar. Again, opening confirmation emails. And ultimately, there's a time when they need to renew and they complete that part of the journey. I want to talk about ways that you can personalize the experience along this journey in different channels. So I'll use the join journey just as an example. So let's say that when the user comes from Google and lands on your homepage, you personalize the banner or content for users that you know are not members. Anyone who's not logged in, that you don't have any new data for, there's not a cookie stored in Episerver, you can start to feature more prominently join journey content that you know are users being referred specifically from Google versus other searches or other referring traffic sources. This is possible in tools like Episerver, where you can personalize what content someone's going to see based off of where they came from. Perhaps even in the opening email, when they sign up for your newsletter, you automatically trigger a personalized email to them that goes a few days or a week after they opened but did not engage in that email. So if you have constituents that are opening emails but not engaging in the content, not clicking through back to the website, can you set up triggers for that cohort or that segment of users to re-engage them? Similar to when you're promoting an event, can you target event promotion videos or articles or testimonials for your association conferences and feature that more prominently to users that are not logged in and that are not members yet? The same is true for confirmation emails. If you're going to make a join offer, can you personalize the confirmation email that they get for the event they're going to attend with join journey value propositions? I appreciate that this may not apply to all of you, or each one might not apply exactly, but the point is you can personalize based off of what people are doing versus necessarily who they are, like male or female or what income level they're in. This is based on their behavior and what they're doing and sequencing personalization along the journey. Now, with that in mind, I want to make a further distinction inside of behavioral data. Behavioral data has two types to it. There is implicit data and explicit data that we gather about constituents and users on our websites. Implicit data is observed behavior. It's usually cookie-based and it doesn't reveal their personally identifiable information. It's something that they don't necessarily tell you, this is who I am or this is what I'm going to do next. It's just something you observe them doing. And I'll show examples of this on the next slide. Explicit data, on the other hand, is provided explicitly by the user. It's usually form-based, where they're giving you their email address or their mailing address, or they're actually registering for something, purchasing something, and that often does reveal personally identifiable information. These two types of data are related to one another. Often implicit data can be observed to help drive people towards an explicit goal that you have for them. Both of these require consent, and both are covered by privacy regulations such as GDPR. So if we go back to those journeys, join journeys and renew journeys, you'll see that along those journeys, some are implicit and some are explicit. Whenever I visit a page or open an email, or if I view a webinar, or I open a newsletter or search for an article, those are just behaviors that you can implicitly observe me doing as a user. But explicitly, as soon as I give you my email address, I register for an event, I join or renew, register for the webinar, I've now filled out some forms and I've told you more about me that is explicit. So I know, Frank, you have worked with a lot of associations on these concepts of how you can start to enhance and personalize the experience based off of what you observe about them, or just what the status is of their journey along this process. So do you want to comment on some of these?
Sure. So these are just three quick examples, and again, relatively low technology, the cost to making these happen. So this is an organization. If you come to their website, you have a join call to action in the upper left-hand side. And so we don't know anything about them or their behaviors. So they're going to want to promote join for everybody. But once they click on login and a particular person logs in, and on login, the system recognizes that they are a member, then that homepage can change. And if you want to just flip to the next slide. that join button changes to renew. So very simple update. It's not intrusive, but it enhances the user experience. Now we're not forcing them to go find the renewal capability. It's being presented to them directly based on the fact that we know something about them from their backend AMS business system, that they're a member and their membership is going to be up in a couple of months. So really straightforward personalization capability. Here's another one where someone has to first log in. Again, we know a little bit more about who they are, and this is showing very member-specific content. So we know they're a member, and now we're going to show them a piece of content. This represents sort of a home page and some various cards of information, and that information right there is very specific to would be recognizable by a member. When you're not logged in, you don't see that information at all. You see another set of content that is more generic and not specific to the persona of a member. And then there's a third example, which is, again, this is based on someone who's not even logged in. It's implicit information. They log in, and for this example, I'm from Maryland, so I would see college fairs, a list of college fairs that are near me in Maryland. If I happen to log in from California, or if I happen to be browsing from California, I could see college fairs that are near me in California. And there are a couple of ways to do this. One is through GeoIP, which Episerver certainly has that capability, and most modern CMSs have. But it also could be done through if someone logs in, or you capture that information in a cookie from previous explicit activity, that you know exactly where they are located through demographics data. You fine-tune this locational personalized experience.
Yeah, Frank, this is a great example of where GeoIP, the IP address of the user coming to your site, is something implicit that you're just observing about them, or you're gathering based off of their behavior, but they're not coming in and registering, hey, this is my IP address, personalize the site based off of what you know is my IP address. That's very smart ways of personalizing and making content more relevant, keeping time on site high, and engagement further. There's another customer that does this on Episerver is Yamaha Wave Runners. If you've come onto the Yamaha Wave Runner site or mobile site in the past and browsed one of their 3 major vehicle lines, the next time you come onto the site, the homepage banner is going to be personalized based off of your session behavior. So using our Episerver, what's called visitor group tool, you're creating these segments. You're defining what has someone be in an X series versus FX series category. And the personalization criteria there is, did they visit those categories on a previous session? And you can apply points and weighting to that so that you show something that's more relevant to them when they come back, including these hero videos that are on the homepage. That's all out of the box and doesn't require development to launch these personalized experiences. They're just native tools within our personalization suite that you use in the CMS. So thanks, Frank. Frank, thanks for going through those examples. And based on the survey and the poll we did earlier, time was #1, but there were obviously some other closer ones. I want to talk a little bit to wrap up around how artificial intelligence and machine learning is now allowing us as marketers to automate and scale up the process of personalizing the website experience. AI is often seen as a very nebulous, somewhat threatening concept, but here at Episerver, we see it as something that's enabling the marketer to do more with the same or fewer resources than they have on staff. So I mentioned earlier that Episerver has a single cloud subscription to these 5 major areas, personalization being one of them. We have over 150 machine learning algorithms that are studying the behavior of individuals on your association website and looking at what they're doing, what they're viewing, what they're searching for, and suggesting, without you having to define rules, what content they should see, based on comparing them to previous or similar types of journeys. We use this a lot in our e-commerce websites as well. And I have an example of that. Motorola is a distributor in Europe that sells parts to repair shops, automotive shops, and they use our machine learning algorithms to automate the personalization of their website using specifically product recommendations. So as someone comes onto the website, has given their cookie consent, we're studying and gathering that data about them. Motorola can use that data to manually personalize the experience, like what we've been talking about, but it also automatically personalizes products that are shown to that user when they come back perhaps to Facebook and see relevant products that they were viewing or from the category they were viewing on the website itself. Another very powerful way that machine learning algorithms can also automate personalization is triggered emails. So as users start shopping, but then perhaps they stop, can we trigger an email to them? With Episerver's personalization engine, you can. And Motorola has seen an 8.5% conversion rate on these emails because it's very relevant content, it's timely, and it's automated once you've established and set up the rules that you want. So we see artificial intelligence as an enhancer to the manual personalization or the rule-based personalization you may be doing with implicit or explicit data. So we've talked about privacy, we've talked about earning trust and how important that is. We've talked about how you can personalize along the journey using the data you capture or allowing machine learning to do so. Now we're going to wrap up with 10 simple tricks for creating unique constituent journeys that lead to increased engagement. I know, Frank, you were going to kick it off with your first 5.
Yeah, so we've talked about some of these already and shown some examples, but again, these are small technology efforts. They're very granular level of personalization, and they're good sort of stepping stones. So, when a user logs in and they have an active membership that's near expiration, provide a direct call to renew. My previous pet peeve on websites for many years was, if people didn't have contact information at the bottom of their website. My current pet peeve is when I go to a member-based organization website and it already knows that I'm a member, why is it asking me to join again? So I think this is a really good one to gain trust and to provide a better experience. Again, we showed a little example of this. Show events that are near the user's location and use either GeoIP or the user's known demographic address information. Show calls to action that are related to the user's membership type. So you have content, you have value propositions that are unique to various segments of your audience. The content for students, they value different kind of content than you have for professional members. So when someone logs in, again, if you know they're a student member, show them some different stuff. And again, you don't have to recreate the entire homepage, but start with something small, a piece of content or a call to action that's unique to them. Show content, and Ed showed a little sort of example of this as well, based on previous browsing experience. If they've spent a lot of time in a particular category of content for your organization and they come back the next time, the site could remember their past session information and provide content that's relevant for that particular topic. And sort of a corollary to that would be, upsell and cross-sell capabilities. So if a member has attended a particular meeting on a particular topic in the past, and when they log in, you can gather that information from your AMS, CRM, business system as part of that login process, and you can deliver them a featured book that is more relevant to them because it's on a topic that they've have interest in.
It's great. I love the stepping stones here to start with personalization, because it seems like that's something people were struggling with. Some of the recommendations that I have, again, going back to the difference between demographic data and behavioral data, use that demographic data, like whether they are a student or a profession or at what stage in their career they are in, to really learn what motivates the user and design a content strategy around that. If you don't have that today, personalization is going to seem very irrelevant or difficult, or you're not going to know where to start. Starting with just one persona and looking at what motivates them and how can I create content that's relevant to them will unlock where to personalize and how to personalize. Then you can use the behavioral data of those types of journeys to choose where and when to personalize the content along the journey. The explicit data that you gather, like email addresses, mailing addresses, something that they've added to their cart, allows you to target content towards a specific customer journey goal. So if they give you their email address, that's the opportunity to then start marketing to the specific journey goal you have, whether it's join or renew or register for a conference or any other goal that you may have for the journey. I also recommend using progressive profiling to ask fewer questions on future form completions. This is quite easy to do in Episerver, and it's important to do because if you've already captured their email address or you've always captured their first and last name, you don't need to keep asking for it. And there are ways to do that so that you reduce the number of forms you're gathering and maybe replace that with a more high value question like topics they're interested in or how you want to support them. And Frank was alluding to this. If you have this data already established in your email marketing system or your AMS solution, be sure to start there. If you already have some segmentation or categorization or just fields of data in there that you can bring into Episerver, you can use that as your starting point for rule-based personalization. You don't need to start with some of these more, what might seem advanced use cases like GeoIP. If you've already got segmented data in AMS, start using that to personalize the experience immediately with an integration. So with that, I know that Lauren, you wanted to open it up to questions and see if there's anything from the audience that we wanted to go through. So over to you.
All right, thanks guys for that presentation. I love the top tips and tricks. That always helps me to just kind of simplify things, and even if I can't do everything at once, it gives me just simple tips and tricks that I can do right now, and it makes starting the whole process a lot easier in my mind. So I hope some of our attendees got that as well. I've received a few questions throughout the presentation, but if you have any questions now, our attendees you can either put them in the chat feature or the Q&A feature, whichever one you can get to first, and we will get to as many as we can. For starters, this one makes sense after our poll question where most people had not started personalization yet. And let's see, my association has not started our personalization efforts. What's the best place to start? Frank, I know you may have covered a few of those in your top 10 list, but I know that's a question that we get from clients all the time. We want to provide personalized experiences. Our board thinks we need to be making more personalized experience. What do we do now?
Yeah, I think this personalization efforts can be overwhelming, or at least seem overwhelming. You have to think of a lot of different things in order to be successful at it. So I try and recommend that you start small. Take advantage of things you're already doing, right? So pretty much all of you have a login process. You're already doing that. The login process for most of you also comes with some data, right? So most of you, when you log in, you're already bringing over the fact that they're a member. So that's sort of I would recommend use that particular piece of data as a starting point for your membership for your journey, personalization journey. So use the fact that someone's a member, update messaging, update content, drive them to specific types of products and meetings, events, etc. So just a small piece, and use something that you're already doing, like login.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that theory. Start small. You don't have to do it all at once. Next question is, I've heard of search features offering personalized results. How does this work? So what they're asking here, it looks like, Ed, is that when people search on your website, how do you make sure the results are personalized to what people are searching for?
Yeah, it's a fairly new capability of search engines that run on your website. So it's something that's emerging and something that's very relevant to what we're doing here at Episerver. So our search engine platform called Episerver Find that you can use to search for articles or pages on your association website does automatically personalize the priority of the search results. So what we talked about earlier with AI was personalizing what content gets shown in an email or what gets shown on a page, like a product recommendation or an article to recommend. Now you can also boost and bury and really curate the right kind of results for the same query that's unique to each of us based off of our individual behavior. So that's now capabilities that are available in the market that, again, help with engagement, with click-through rates, getting people to the right content so they have a successful journey.
Excellent. That makes great sense. You know what? I'm not getting any other questions or chats. Give attendees just a few more moments because none are coming through.
We answered all the questions. That's why.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We've solved all the world's problems in 47 minutes on a webinar.
Congratulations. You can go home now, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So I'm not getting any other questions or not coming through on the Q&A or the chat anyway. Lots of times I'll listen to a webinar and then I start thinking about it, and 2 days later I have a question. So if that happens to any of you, always know that you can reach out to Frank, Ed, or myself, and we'll be happy to get back in touch with you and answer those questions as best we can. So we went over a lot of material in a short amount of time, so we hope you're able to take that all in. And like we said, definitely reach out if you want to further this conversation or if you want any follow-up questions. So later today or tomorrow, we will send you the recording. And stay tuned for our next webinar. We're going to have a webinar in December where we can talk about web trends for 2019. So thanks again for coming, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Take care.